Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for joining today. I am really excited to have this stream on Visual Studio Code today, and just momentarily, I will be joined by two VS Code team members. And during the next hour, we're just going to talk about all things VS Code, starting from a little bit of the history of the editor to how it's built to how the team works together to deliver such a great editor and great experience to us. I think that this is a perfect stream as we are still early in October and kicking off a whole month of fun open source projects. This is Hacktoberfest, so it is a perfect opportunity to talk especially about, how you might be able to contribute to this project and kind of get that insider's look at Visual Studio Code. So without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce our two guests for today. So we have Sun and Jackson who are joining us from the Visual Studio Code team. And I will pass it over to both of y'all to introduce yourself. Sana, how about you go first?
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Sana Ajani, and I'm a program manager on the team. I've been on the team for about 2 years, and it's been an awesome experience so far. This is one of the coolest projects at Microsoft to be on. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sana.
And I'm Jack. I've been a software engineer on the VS Code team for almost a year. It's going to be a year on Wednesday, so almost my anniversary. And yeah, I'm excited to talk to you guys about what I do, how we work on GitHub, and how you can possibly contribute.
All right. Thank you both for that. I guess to kick things off, let's just get straight into the questions. And like always, we encourage you all watching to ask any and all questions that you have, but we'll just start with some of the pre-prepared questions. So first, a question for you, Sana, and kind of just, wanting to learn more and kind of hear about the history of VS Code itself. I think I'm really curious to learn that story. I think I've been using VS Code for about 2 years now, but it seemed, from my perspective, like it kind of just popped up and, it was just this like very new and cool, open source project that all the developers were using. So yeah, I'd just love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so VS Code's been around for about 5 years now, but the project and like the idea behind VS Code started out a bit longer than that. It's been about 8 or 9 years. So Eric Gamma and his team kind of came over to Microsoft, and he's like the technical fellow behind the project. And they had this mission to make coding in the browser possible. And they wanted to make it seem like you're actually not coding in the browser, that it's really fast and performant, and like a really good experience. You get all the normal things that you expect when you're coding. So that's what they started off building. And then they ended up building something called the Monaco editor, which was it had a lot of the IntelliSense and like kind of things that you expect, but and it was a good start. Like it was adopted internally. It's actually still the basis for a lot of current editors out there. So if you think of online editors like Replit, things like that, they still are based off of the Monaco editor and like use a bunch of more layers on top of that. And so, it was adopted internally, and then they wanted to make it more like fully fleshed. They added things like multiple editors and Git integration, and they kind of pivoted at that point to building a Node app that could be used by everyone. And thus VS Code was born, right? It was kind of Microsoft at the time, like didn't have many products that were like targeted towards non-Windows developers. And so they had built this really great coding environment, and they thought, how can we get this to anyone, no matter what your OS is, no matter what you're working on? And so that's how they kind of decided, let's make this and let's make it open source.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really great to hear kind of a little bit about that history. And it sounds like, right off the bat, kind of, or at least in the early stages, there was kind of that very, clear choice to make it open source so that everyone can use it. Do you want to talk a little bit, or does anything kind of stick out as like a learning along the way? I think you maybe called out a couple things, that were really important to kind of include right off the bat. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, and I think like in this process of kind of going open source, I think we kind of learned about like what does it mean to like work in the open, right? Because at this point now, anyone can kind of claim they're an open source project by putting their project up on GitHub, and eventually like every now and then putting code into it. But it was this idea of like really working in the open and like development in the open, and like how for that journey, like we have to really include the community with us, and that like the community needs to be involved with our project in every step of the way. So we've had the community has been such a contributor to our project from the beginning. So we've learned things along the way for sure. Like for instance, the first time that we tried to change the VS Code icon, like that was a big learning for us. So we kind of, we wanted to do it very speedily, very quickly, and we kind of just did it quietly in one of the releases, and immediately we started getting feedback on GitHub, like, hey, like how did you make the VS Code icon orange? Why could you have, like, how did you do this? You didn't ask any of us. And like that was a big learning for us, because we realized that we had to be very transparent with what we wanted to do, and we had to iterate on it with the community and then kind of close the loop. So 2 years ago, again, we tried changing our icon, but this time we learned from the first time. So, our design team put up an issue on GitHub. We had people comment on it, give their feedback. We made iterations on it. And that's kind of like the biggest learning that we've had, is that we want to include the community in all of our sort of major changes and get their feedback.
Right. Awesome. That's a great example. And I think it just shows how much the community absolutely wants to be involved in these things. I think especially design choices are, a very, very visible thing that customers tend to notice. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting one. And I very much do remember that. So thanks, Lena, for that. And there was a comment that just came in. How laid back does Jackson look? Full on just chilling out. Seriously, Jackson. I want to be by the beach like you are right now. So we'll direct this next question over to you, actually. And first, kind of starting to look maybe just a little bit more internally, and then I think we'll go back to the community aspect. But just kind of looking at, at the team composition of the Visual Studio Code team. Can you tell us a little bit about that and kind of how the team is divided and, different like sub-projects and what folks work on?
Yeah, definitely. And I want to note that this isn't like purposeful. This is the result of a very hectic weekend that placed me just somewhere in Central California at the time of this call.
Not a bad place to be. Doesn't look like it.
But I'm happy to be. So our team is split. About half of us are in, or maybe a bit more than half are in Redmond in the United States side of things. And about maybe a third of the team is in Zurich. So most of the original members of the team are in Zurich. That's where Eric Gamma's team is based. And the team in Zurich consists of, I think, maybe 12-ish software engineers, whereas the team in Redmond is about 10 to 15 software engineers and an additional 7 or 8 PMs. Sana might know more about that. So the gist of it is that division does cause a need to have a lot of sort of organization in the open. We don't have a lot of synchronous communication between the two teams, and because of that, a lot of the organization happens on GitHub itself. For instance, our monthly plans are all developed by first Kai and Eric in unison, but then published to the open for everybody, including all the engineers. So we all
Who are the folks that you just mentioned? Sorry, or were those project managers or?
Kai Metzel is engineering manager, and then Eric Gamma is a technical fellow, and he started the whole Monaco project.
Gotcha. Sorry to distract. Go ahead.
Yeah. So like I said, we have to have a central sort of plan. We don't have a whole team. I guess we do have weekly or monthly team meetings, but a lot of that's going over the public GitHub plan. So Sana was saying, our development needs to happen in the open, or we choose to have it happen in the open because we want to have that strong community aspect. So we release a monthly plan and we request feedback on it, and we, over the course of the month, will check off items and present, put icons to show which items we're working on or which items we might need to defer until the next month, so that the community has an idea, and also everybody on the team has an idea of what's going on. Because like I said, we don't have a lot of synchronous communication given the split.
Yeah, and has the team always been so, split geographically? Has it always been kind of distributed across like two very different regions?
Yeah, so it started out and it was only the Zurich side of the team.
Mm,
Eric Gamma and his team, I think it was maybe 5 or 6 people back then, did a lot of the original work, and they were doing all the work on VS Code before it was even known as VS Code at all, known as the Monaco editor. And then slowly, a couple more people, like one at a time, started joining on the Redmond side of things, and eventually, over time, it started to become the case that the Redmond side was actually larger than the Zurich side. But at first, it was all Zurich. Yeah.
I feel like
gotcha.
the good part of like kind of having like a split team is that like basically we're all kind of on. Like there is no like on call because some part of the team is always awake during the day, and so
Right.
we're all able to like monitor that's happening on GitHub, on social media about VS Code, and kind of there is no on call, which is good.
That's definitely a plus. I think, a couple things that come to mind. I'm surprised at how or the size of the team. I don't want to say how small the team is, but I'm very, much surprised at the size of the team, just given, how wildly popular that Visual Studio Code continues to be, and just one of, the most popular and kind of most contributed to open source projects out there. So I think it's definitely just an amazing feat, that the team is able to accomplish. And it probably, makes sense that you don't work, so synchronously. I don't think that's even possible, but from what it sounds like, pretty much someone is like always awake and at least, very much in sync to what's going on in the project, and kind of like hearing things that are happening, and engaging with the community on a regular basis.
And the main project is pretty is like the core editor, which Jackson was mentioning. But there are teams for a lot of the Microsoft extensions that exist in VS Code. So, for instance, the Python extension
Mm,
or the Java extension, C++ extension, they're all their own kind of teams
mm,
that have their own set of PMs and engineers working on it. They have their own GitHub repos where they also publish their plans, have their own sort of release cycle. So it's actually like the whole product and everything Microsoft offers in VS Code is kind of a bigger team now.
mhm.
But it's good to like, we're constantly in sync with a lot of the extension teams, making sure we adopt they adopt our APIs from core, and that we're aware of like all the updates. So it's become a pretty big project now.
Gotcha. And then could you speak just a little bit more about, like, just extend on what you were just saying about different extension teams? So you mentioned the Python extension team, for example. So were you just referring to like a small team within Microsoft that helps kind of, maintain this extension?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
exactly. So there's its own set of folks that work on that extension, and so often like you might see that like there are things that extensions do that if we see it's really popular with that specific community, then we maybe think about like adopting it into core and then getting
Mm,
it available for everyone. So there's like really great examples of that. For instance, the Python team. Like they had Jupyter Notebook support, and we saw that was becoming really popular. So now we're working on something similar in VS Code Core, like a native notebook editor that we can offer to all these extensions to use. So it's a really
awesome.
like I guess modular way of doing work for this project, because there are sort of each extension is its own team.
Right. Okay, good to know. That's fantastic. So next, I guess let's talk a little bit more kind of just about how, basically everything is done out in the open. So I guess I'm kind of curious to learn like a little bit more. So you mentioned kind of your planning is done on a monthly basis, out in the open, and you also release once a month. So I guess we already talked through that. Maybe something else that would be interesting to know is just like, how do you deal with contributions? Like, I'm sure that you're getting like barraged with issues, and you pull requests maybe on a regular basis. So kind of how do you handle the process of dealing with all of that?
Yeah, so we definitely get a bunch of issues, and also a good amount of PRs, but I'd say the most like onslaught sort of feeling thing is the issues. The PRs are more few and far between. And we have a good amount of like automated issue triaging processes. There's actually like a machine learning based classifier that I developed that will automatically figure out which area a particular issue is to. Like, for instance, if this is a Git issue or a issue with the editor or an issue with the terminal, it can decide that. And each of those areas is owned by a single person, which is kind of interesting. So on a lot of teams, you'd have like maybe a whole team manages like the Git integration, or a whole team manages the terminal. For us, it's only a single person, and the issue triaging bot can go and assign each of those issues to that person. But it's not fully accurate, and it doesn't work 100% of the time. So sometimes it will leave issues in the inbox. And in those cases, we have a weekly rotating slot of somebody that will just go through every day and just keep an eye on the inbox and assign issues and ask for more information if it needs more information, look at PRs and assign PRs, and all of that sort of thing.
Gotcha. So like a first responder type person who goes through all that regularly.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned the issue bot. How does the issue bot work actually? Is that like some kind of like bot that you created? Is that using GitHub Actions? How does that work?
Yeah, so the bot I created is actually, it does use GitHub Actions to run it, but the training was done with like a GPU machine on Azure. And it's actually all available open source. The repository is something like Microsoft/VS Code-GitHub triage actions. And they're all available for any other repository to use. There's been a couple different repositories at Microsoft that use some of the ones we have. For instance, our feature request triaging flow. There's a whole setup we have where if we get a feature request where we aren't really sure if we want to take it or not, like if we might be interested in it, but it depends if the community wants it, then it enters like a state where it's called a backlog candidate. And we have bots that will check all the backlog candidates, and if they have more than 20 upvotes, then they like promote them to be a full-on like feature request. Otherwise, after 6 months, they'll demote them. And that's another thing that's just available as a GitHub action for anybody that want to use it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for explaining that. And it might be helpful, like as we're talking about a lot of this, and especially like talking about like specific repositories and issues and stuff. I don't know if either of you want to show that off quickly, or at least we can maybe take a look at, what that actually entails a little bit more. That might be helpful just to get the visual, and also share the link in the chat. I'll keep chatting in the meantime. I think something else that I was wondering about was, and now it completely escapes me. Oh, okay. Also along the line of issues was about like, how do folks look for things that like they can help out with? Like, do you do any particular type of labeling around that? Like help wanted, or what do you do to kind of advertise that something actually needs, a community member to look at it?
Yeah, so we have a great labeling system. So if you go to the issues in VS Code, and maybe I can share this.
Yeah. If you have your screen up, I can show it for sure.
Yeah. So if we go over to the GitHub repo, and then you can go over to the issues here, and you can search for issues that are labeled. We have a couple of labels. So good first issue and help wanted are typically issues that our team has identified that we think would be a good thing for first PR or your first exposure to open source. So yeah, you can see a lot of them still have some PRs that our team will then review. So this is a great way to kind of get started. Help wanted has even more. So I think that's a good first way to get started. And you might notice you asked about issues earlier. You might notice that there's like a ton of issues opened on our repo. So I think we get over 100 issues a day, and it's a lot for our team. So like the bots definitely help. And then one iteration out of every year, so 1 month, which is this month, incidentally, we have a kind of like what we call a backlog cleaning issue. And so that's the issue where we won't create any new features, but we will kind of work on going through and triaging a lot of the existing issues and PRs and kind of burning down this issue rate.
Gotcha.
So that's what this release will be. It'll be a release of all the closed issues, hopefully. So a lot of bug fixes, a lot of things to improve performance, things like that.
Awesome. That's always a fun time. I mean, at least I think so. Just being able to kind of, narrow down some of that backlog a little bit. All right, cool. Well, thanks for showing us that. I think the next question that I have, and just another call for folks to just drop any questions that you might have, is just kind of about hearing, what it's like working on the Visual Studio Code team, and kind of like, what aspects of that you enjoy, and even like what drew you to the team in the first place. I know you've mentioned you've been on the team 2 years. Jackson, you're just passing your 1 year. So yeah, I'd just love to hear about that experience.
Yeah,
Jackson, you go first. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Jackson.
Yeah, I was drawn to the team just because I used the product myself and I really liked it. I was doing an internship at Microsoft a couple years ago, and my manager back then recommended VS Code to us, and at the time I was using Atom, so I saw it and it seemed like something that was just really like a great lightweight editor, and I got more and more interested in it and started submitting PRs, and then from that ended up talking to the engineering manager and securing a job, which was very cool. So my initial foray into VS Code was actually submitting PRs to VS Code.
Awesome.
And anybody can do this, like Sana said, help wanted and good first issue labels.
Yeah, and I think I really like working on this team because of the amount of customer interaction and how directly we can talk to our customers is. It's a developer tool, and developers make for very interesting customers. So a large part of our jobs as PMs is to just directly talk to them, whether it's doing interviews or user studies or just talking at conferences and kind of getting a pulse of what the trends are, what people want. So that's been, I think, the most fun, is that we have such interesting and smart customers, and it's fun to develop a product for them. And I think the speed at which the team works at, we have a monthly release. So there's a lot of work that can be done in that month, and it's a fast release cycle. So it's always interesting and a fast-paced team. So it's good.
Definitely. It very much seems so that it's, very fast-paced, that you're kind of constantly hearing from your customers, learning a lot from them, trying to iterate really quickly and, deliver new features. So I think it sounds really exciting. I was mentioning to both of you, I used to work on the GitHub for pull request extension back when I was at GitHub, and I really just enjoyed that whole experience. I think that was my first time really kind of being an active maintainer for different open source projects. So it's always really interesting just to see how much folks want to get involved and are helpful, really, really helpful along the way. So now let's talk a little bit more about kind of what y'all are both up to. What are some, things that you're currently working on that you want to talk a little bit about, or maybe demo for us? Whoever wants to go first.
Jackson, do you want to go first? Or I can go first.
Yeah, you can go first.
Okay, cool. So one thing that we're kind of focusing more on is kind of understanding how VS Code can be friendlier or more useful for, I guess, new coders or students. And so we realize that there is a lot of potential in that market with students and people who are learning to code for the first time, whether it's formally or taking classes or boot camps or things like that. So we really want to try to make the onboarding process a little bit easier, try to make a lot of content and resources available to folks starting out. So one thing that we just launched that I can share, so you can see my screen. One thing we just launched is a sort of a new website for folks learning to code. So sometimes we realize that having lots of docs or things like that can be confusing or intimidating. So we're trying to make it easier for people to get started with VS Code. So we created these installers. So we know that Python and Java are two very popular languages as people's first languages. And so, oftentimes the setup for those kinds of languages. So you have to install the correct version of Python. You have to install the JDK and add it to your path and make sure you have the correct extensions. All of that can be kind of intimidating and discourage people often because of that, setup cost. So we've made it really easy with these installers or coding packs. So just one button and it does everything for you. It sets up your environment, it installs VS Code, it installs the correct VS Code extensions. So that's something that we've been working on, and just a lot more content and videos, tutorials to how to use the editor. And so one thing I want to demo with that is something called VS Code remote development, which some people might have heard of. So remote development is a way for us to kind of take VS Code and the guts of VS Code and run it in a different place, right? So we can run it inside of a virtual machine, we can run it inside of a container, or we can run it inside of WSL if you're using that on Windows. And so it's this idea that like the VS Code server, we separated the VS Code UI from the VS Code server, and we put the server and all the code and all the extensions that you're running in this remote machine that isn't your local computer. So that also opens up a lot of cases for those like new coders or people that, now that we're all remote, like we don't have our beefy machines in the office anymore. So we're just kind of on our laptops and we're using a lot of VMs now. So that's like a really good use case for this. So I can kind of demo what that looks like. So you see that I have this like folder open, and I want to learn Java, right? So I can see if I have Java on my computer, and I don't think I do. And it's going to ask me to like install the JDK. And I don't know if I want to do that because I just want to try learning Java. So instead of doing that, what I can do is I can open up VS Code inside of a dev container. So I have this project open. It has this dev container folder here, which consists of a Docker file and consists of a dev container.json. So it's okay if you're like, I guess, not familiar with containers. You don't have to be for this to work. That's kind of also in itself a confusing concept, but you don't really need to know what containers or Docker really is. Containers are just like a lightweight unit that you can run software inside of, and the Docker is just like an engine for you to be able to do that. So I can have this dev container. This is what specifies how VS Code will open up inside of a container and how it's going to connect to a container. So it points to a Docker file, this Docker file that I just pulled down. It's a standard Java image. And it also specifies a bunch of settings that VS Code should set up when it opens up in a container, and a bunch of extensions. So what I could do is I could reopen this folder inside of a container. So I'm going to click, because I have the remote development extensions installed. This remote development extension pack comes with all three of these. So because I have those installed, I get this little indicator on the corner of my screen. I can reopen a folder in a container.
Nice.
And it's going to take a quick second to set up. But what's happening here is that VS Code is connecting to this container that's, I'm running it locally, but I'm basically inside of a new environment now. So, I'm inside of this Linux environment, and if I search for Java, and I have it inside of this container, like that's so cool, right? Like I didn't have it on my local computer. All I had to do was build this image and connect to a container that's specific for me for Java, and I have it. So now I can run this code that I wouldn't have been able to do before.
Sweet.
Yeah, so it's super cool. If I wanted to, go ahead and like write some Java code, could quickly do that. If I remember how to write Java code, public static void main. Yeah, so you get the point, right? Like now I have Java inside of this this container. You can see on the corner I'm in this, and so you can do that for anything, right? Like if you're a new developer joining a team, and they have a week-long worth of README instructions to set up your environment. If they just had this dev container, you could so easily get started with working.
Gotcha. And just to step back for a moment, all you need basically to set up this dev container is the extension that you were showing off, the remote workspace extension.
Yeah, so you need the remote development extension. So
That's
again,
what it is. Okay.
if you search for that in the marketplace, you can get an extension pack that comes with all three. Or you could just get the one for your use case, containers, virtual machines, or WSL. And you also, for the containers, need the prerequisite is to have Docker on your machine.
Okay. And I'm assuming also, like, if you don't really know, that you need, any one of these three extensions and Docker, like you would be prompted to kind of like install all of this from the Learn landing page that you shared with us.
Yeah, so you could go from the Learn, or you could go just to our docs, and there's an entire section on kind of how to get started with the remote development.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that was super cool to see. I think, yeah, it was awesome to see that live. And let's add Jackson back in the stream. There we go. Cool. So I think, yeah, that was, again, really interesting. I'm taking a moment to look at some of the questions that came in, and I'll just pose these out to both of you. So what else other than TypeScript are the programming languages used to build VS Code? That's kind of the first question. And then along with that, can you talk about the learning curve for Electron? So I don't know, maybe Jackson, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so the vast majority of VS Code happens in TypeScript. Besides that, we do have a couple Rust modules. For instance, the JS debug uses Rust to create hashes of all the files it is debugging, and we just use Rust because it's a bit faster for doing that. Also, search is using Rust because it uses riprep, and riprep is just a very fast Rust search engine. And besides that, really the vast majority of it is going to be in TypeScript.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Good to know. And yeah, that was kind of my assumption too. I didn't know that there were like parts written in Rust. That's pretty cool. The second part of that question was just, can you talk about the learning curve, or is there any learning curve for Electron in particular?
Yeah, that's interesting.
And it might be helpful first to mention like how Electron comes into the picture anyway.
Yeah, need to deal with my dog trying to unplug my computer. So most of the time when I'm developing, it's actually very generic for what the target is, because I don't know if people are aware of, like, for instance, GitHub code spaces, where a lot of the UI isn't running on Electron, it's running in the normal browser. So most of the time when we're developing anything, it's in a very back-end agnostic way. But you can look inside the VS Code source repository and you'll see that everything is actually layered. So you'll have like folders that say common, or folders that say Electron browser, folders that will say browser. And we have, and it's all sort of structured out about what you can put in each place. For exact like learning curve for developing Electron apps, I'm not really sure, because like I said, a lot of it isn't an Electron app to me. It's just like a JavaScript app.
Yeah. I would say that probably answers their question. I'm going to assume that that's what they were getting at when just kind of wondering, what other languages and, like how is code built basically, and like what it's built on top of. So I think that's super helpful to know that there is maybe less Electron involved anyway. So yeah, I think that answers the question. Let's take one more question, and then we can hear from you, Jackson, next about what you like about working on the team and kind of what you're doing currently. So this question is, what is the process when deciding which extension to include in the extensions marketplace? I don't know. Yeah,
I can take this. So anyone can make an extension in VS Code. That's actually like the cool part about it, is we have like a massive community of extensions. I think there's over 19,000 extensions, I want to say. There's a ton, right? And so like a majority of those are contributed from the community. There's some that are maintained by Microsoft and other companies, but the majority of them are just made by the community. And so I guess the question was, what's the process? Anyone can make an extension, and anyone can publish an extension to the marketplace. And we've got a lot of great tutorials on actually how to make your first extension, how to set up a publisher with the on Azure and with the marketplace, and how to submit your first one. So I actually recommend that as a great project if you want to get familiarized with the kinds of extensions, the VS Code code base a little bit, what parts you can use to extend with. So actually, it's a great project. Anyone can submit one.
Yep. Good to know. And yeah, I did post a link to get started with writing your first extension if anyone is curious out there. So Jackson, next let's pass it over to you just to kind of hear about what you're currently working on that you can share with us, and maybe anything that you want to demo.
I think you're muted, Jackson.
Yeah, I was muted and in the share dialog, so let me get through both of those. Can I share my screen now?
Yep. Ready? There we go.
Yeah. So a lot of what I've been working on what I'm starting to work on is the first run user onboard experience. And this is still very design focused right now. But what we're trying to look at is how can we make every part of VS Code more discoverable. And yeah, that's the gist of it. Oh boy.
Oh, it's like Inception.
Yeah, and what I like most about working on VS Code is, like Sana said, just how quickly everybody's developing and how how smart everybody around me is. If I have any sort of question about oh, I'm trying to do this thing, what are ideas people have for how I can do this most efficiently, I'll get tons of just really great areas to explore that I hadn't thought about. Yeah. And
Gotcha.
It's a great learning experience every day, just based on who I'm working with.
Yeah, that's always a huge plus, I think, to being on a team of lots of smart individuals. I think one other question that just came to mind, and Jackson, I'll pose this to you, is I think that, earlier you had mentioned that pretty much there's one owner for everything on the team. So maybe it's not that way, but maybe that's not the best way to put it, but I think that's what you were kind of alluding to earlier. So I'm just kind of curious, do you have any area that you're particularly responsible for? I don't know if that aligns just to what you just showed us about kind of this new, kind of onboarding experience, or if it's something else.
Yeah, I'd say I'm mostly working on search. So if you're familiar with the the search editors in VS Code, I've implemented them and I'm maintaining them currently. Besides that, like I said, I did all of the GitHub triaging actions and that sort of thing. I've also done a bit of work in just documenting the notebooks. But yeah, I'd say my primary focus right now is search and moving on to being in this welcome experience.
Gotcha. Okay, good to know. And yeah, I'm sure that must be interesting, because even though there's kind of one person who's responsible for this area, because, you're all working together, probably pairing on things, reviewing each other's code, that everyone kind of gets in a little taste of what everyone else is doing at the same time too. Cool. So let me now move over to another question that came in. Will multi-screen be coming soon now that we can send information to or from different browser tabs? I don't know if anyone wants to take that.
Sorry, what was that exactly?
And I can, let me repeat the question. Will multi-screen be coming soon now that we can send information to or from different browser tabs? So is this a code? I'm alluding, Helen Earthis, that this is a code spaces specific question.
Oh, will you be able to work in different tabs with code spaces open?
They don't mention code spaces. I'm just kind of alluding that maybe that's what like the question is about, especially when thinking about like multi-screen and information kind of between different browser tabs. I think so. So, and we can also ask for more clarification and come back to this if
I think multi-screen in general is a pretty like highly requested concept, and currently there's like some architectural challenges just in how different windows on the actual desktop will communicate, and we really don't have that solved on the like on code spaces either. Like communicating between different tabs isn't something that we do, and in general there would be a lot of architectural changes that need to happen because, like, as probably most people are aware right now, you can't open the same workspace in two different windows. And we make a lot of assumptions in the code based on that. For instance, like any sort of storage might be scoped to like what your workspace URI is. And we make an assumption that that won't change anywhere on any other window. So if we were to have multiple windows, it required pretty significant architectural changes that I don't think anything recently has changed to make them come anytime soon.
Gotcha. Okay, that's helpful. So this is not on the roadmap. I hope that answers the question, but let us know if there's any follow-up. I think the next question that I'll pose to both of you is just hearing a little bit more about, maybe what are some of your favorite features, or maybe even favorite feature if there is one that, has recently come out or maybe that you're working on now. So now I'll pass it over to you first. Sorry, Jackson.
Yeah, I can demo one. So we recently came out with something called settings sync. So let me close my container that I had open. Okay. So settings sync is now, I think it's in stable, right? Yeah, it was in insiders for a bit. So when I say insiders, we have VS Code insiders. It's a separate build that we release daily, and that's where we kind of test out a lot of features before we put them in our stable or monthly release. So setting sync was a popular extension, and it lets you sync your like settings and themes, your UI state and your extensions across different installations of VS Code that you might have, say like on a separate machine or a separate device or like a lab machine, whatever you're kind of using. So for instance, I can show that right now. You see on my screen, I have VS Code stable and VS Code insiders open side by side. So let me split my screen. So I can, because I've signed in. So if you look at the bottom here, you can sign in to settings sync, and I've signed in and I've turned it on. So you can show like what exactly I'm syncing between my different versions of VS Code. So I'm syncing my settings, snippets, shortcuts, and UI state. I'm choosing not to sync my extensions, but I can if I want to. And then say, for instance, I change a setting in my insiders build. So say I change the theme to something like this. In my stable build, I can go back. It should refresh or yeah, so there you go. You just saw that happen. So it took a second, but literally my settings changed across my devices, across my different versions of VS Code. And so this is like a super awesome thing. Like if you find yourself maybe having to reinstall VS Code and you don't want to lose all of your settings and keyboard shortcuts that you like had in your version before you had to reinstall it, now you can just log into settings sync and we will take care of what you're syncing and kind of be able to restore it for you. So again, you can click on settings sync, log in, and then you can show even what's being synced. You can show how often it's syncing. So that's one of the coolest things I think you can do in VS Code now.
Yeah, that's great. Another awesome demo. Another new thing that I learned today. That's awesome. Jackson, what about you?
Yeah, and I can share the work we've been doing on notebooks. So is my screen sharing?
There we go.
So for VS Code, like there are a bunch of different notebook implementations out there already. Like people know about Jupyter notebooks maybe. There's like the Google Colab. a bunch of different things. So what we wanted to do in VS Code is create like a notebook provider agnostic solution to notebooks where lots of different notebooks could work under the same VS Code like front end. And to sort of model that, what we started out by making is this GitHub issue notebook, where instead of like each of these cells containing actual code, they contain queries that you can run against GitHub. For instance, here, this is the VS Code inbox, and I can run this query and it will execute against GitHub and show me that there are a couple debug-related issues in the inbox. And this is especially cool for things like our endgame, which is the last week in every iteration where we want to go through all the open issues and verify them or report or create test plan items. So we can create these very complicated like queries against VS Code and do things like assign variables and all that stuff and use that inside a notebook that queries against GitHub.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is super cool. Actually, I'm very excited for this. So what you are showing us, like, is this, you called this like a notebook. So it's not like a markdown file or anything. What you were calling this is a notebook. I just wanted to clarify that first.
Notebook. So you can see there's a bunch of different cells here. Like this here is a markdown cell.
Okay, gotcha. And then you have the executable cells too.
Yeah, this is an executable cell, and there's been a kernel, it's called, that says that it knows how to execute cells that are called under the GitHub issues language. So that cell provides this output, and it can provide output in terms of text, or in this case, it's providing HTML output. It can provide interactive output, for instance, like IPy widgets. And all sorts of different things. So this is called the, this is the GitHub issue notebooks extension, and it's available just on the marketplace. But yeah, there's lots of different applications for this. So this is going to be super exciting for the future of VS Code. It's going to be a lot of notebooks, and they're very powerful, which is cool.
Yeah, this looks awesome. I definitely would like to try that out. Let me just drop the name and the link in the chat in case anyone else wants to go and check this out too. My link looks a little weird. Let me try that again. But you could also just search for it inside of your extensions marketplace. So, Sana, a question came up about setting sync. Is syncing global or user tasks going to be a thing? I use them a lot to wrap common CLI tasks, and I'm sticking with the Sean Khan extension because of that. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts about any more global or user settings.
So there's actually, there's been a feature request for that. It's, I guess we're aware of it. And so our team has probably added it to our backlog. I'm not sure when, but I think I can post the link to the open issue on GitHub, and we'd love for you to comment on it and let us know like this is a priority for you.
Awesome. We got an EA in response to that. So yeah, that is exciting. Good to know. And yeah, if you have the link for that, I will share it here. Cool. Let's see if there are any more questions that I missed. I think we're good for now. Maybe one more question that I have for you all, and then I'll stop asking my own questions for now, is just like any favorite tips that you have. So you kind of just highlighted some cool features, but is there any like tips, especially I think, both of you are very much like expert Visual Studio Code users. Like, is there anything that helps you work a lot more quickly or efficiently, or just like anything that you think people should know about?
Yeah, I can share my screen and share a couple. There's so many. Like, I feel like VS Code tips, you could write a whole book about this.
Absolutely.
I'm sure people have. But I think some common ones that I think people might not know about. So for instance, let me just open a project. So say I have like a file open, you can have multiple editors. So right now I can click on this and have, I can have multiple files and multiple editors, but you can split this multiple times. So if I were to actually hold down, I can do it 3 times, 4 times, and I can actually click on Option or Alt and click on this, and I can split my screen horizontally too, not just vertically. So that's a fun tip that I don't think many people know about. Another one that I like is being able to move this activity bar. So if I go to View, I think Appearance, I can go to Move Sidebar to the left or right. So if I wanted to, I can move it to the right. And some people claim that this is like superior because now we read left to right. So now you have your code earlier, not just this this activity bar on the left. So that's like a stylistic thing that some people like too.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I always have mine on the left, but now I'm thinking I should try this out.
Yeah, and then that you could try it out. And another thing I think a lot of people may not have known that we recently added. So we really want you to like be able to customize VS Code to how you want to work. And so part of that is being able to move around a lot of the views in this like sidebar and in the terminal. So say for instance, like there's different if I were to be debugging and there's multiple views over here, I can actually like drag this into, for instance, the terminal if I wanted to. I drag it back, or I could drag one of these into something over here. So I can either make it its own view or I can add it to another existing one. So you can really like play around with where things in VS Code go, right? So for instance, there's so many, like if I wanted to have, like one thing I think I did change was I wanted to have like the timeline view, and I put it in the source control view because that was easier for me to look.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great one.
Very interesting. Cool. Yeah, I like those tips as well. Seems like you have like a whole customized sidebar and such. So that's really nice. And we got a comment from the chat. Today I learned to the right it goes. Same.
Jackson, what's your favorite like tip?
Yeah, I can share my screen. So one thing that's cool building off of what Sana just said is if you have like 3 different editors, if you drag them, so you make like one of them or 2 of them very small, you can just click into these and it will open them up as you're going through. So for instance, if you have like HTML here and CSS here and JavaScript here, you can very quickly like just navigate through them all while still being able to like sort of consult on what's going on.
What? That's so cool. How do you do that? I didn't know you could do that. I love that.
Yeah, all you need to do is just like open up a couple different editors and just make them all the way as small as possible, and it will automatically do it. And this isn't like a setting or anything. This is just by default.
Awesome.
That's cool.
Another thing I really like is Workbench color customizations. So for instance, here I use the macOS like high contrast mode, which in most places puts like these extra lines everywhere, but in VS Code we don't really do that. So what I can do is go in here, and actually you can see that all of these lines have gone away. And this is actually super easy to do because if you go into a themes section and just hit Control Space, you'll get every single color token that we have just available to you.
Oh my goodness.
So for instance, if I want to do like editor background, I can do that and it will automatically show me like, okay.
Oh my God, the red.
You don't want to do that, but it does make it very easy to understand what's going on.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would understand what most of these settings mean, but I guess if you can try them out immediately, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jackson, I actually really do like your high contrast theme. It's really tricked out.
Yeah, thank you. It's just GitHub Light, but just extra contrast.
Extra contrast. Good for the eyes. Yeah, I like to change my theme fairly often as well, just try out new themes because there's so many fun ones out there and just so many, again, customizations that you can do, like Jackson is showing even with like the themes and, kind of the color schemes that you're using.
Yeah. Another cool feature is so like multi-cursor edits. So people maybe know about like if you have a search or if you have something that you want to change every instance of, like we have this disposable, we can just go in there and if you hit screen share mode, that screen share mode is another cool feature. It's just called toggle screencast mode, and it'll give you all these. So if you have something selected, you can just hit Command Shift L and edit all the instances at once, which is pretty nice. So if I wanted to change this, I could like go in and change F2 to change the name, or if there's something that like I want to change every instance of command, even in comments and that sort of thing, I can do that and it will work everywhere. So it's multi-cursor is probably the feature that I use more than absolutely anything else in VS Code.
Gotcha. And I'm sorry, one more time, how are you doing this multi-select? Am I missing that? Are you just double clicking on things?
So I can double click to select the word, and then
Yeah.
once I hit this, I just hit Command Shift L.
Command Shift L, that's what it is. There we go.
You're going really fast, and you're like, oh wait, I don't want to do register command. And you can hit Command U, and that will revert it. So now it's going backward. And Command U will actually take you like, it'll undo any cursor operation, which is kind of neat. So it's like Command Z, except it's Command Z for where you've clicked and where your cursor has moved.
Very cool.
That's like a really powerful one. I feel like, that meme of like, I think it's like Jim Carrey like typing on his keys. Like I feel like that's what you seem so powerful with that.
Absolutely. And yeah, I feel like knowing that could definitely save you a lot of time. Even from like Command Shift F and then doing that replace and stuff. Cool. Well, thank you both. That's, I think, the last question that I have. And I don't at the moment see any others in chat. But everyone also is really excited at some of the things that you just demoed. So yeah, I think maybe everyone learned something new, and that is our goal for today, that hopefully everyone learned something new and cool. Yeah. Any other final words that either of you have? Sorry, not to like sound like doom, but anything else that you want to add?
I think I would say like follow us on social media, on Twitter @code. That's the cool handle that we have. We always try to post like relevant blogs and updates. We post about our releases, and we've been holding new like YouTube live events to discuss more features about our release every month. So tune into those if you're interested. Yeah, and happy coding. If you have more feedback and like issues that you run into, like always open them up on GitHub. We want to hear from you.
And I'd just say that if anybody's like interested in contributing to VS Code, definitely take a look at the Good First Issue label. We do really enjoy like working with the community and getting any sort of community feedback, especially during this Hacktoberfest month. I mean, you can get like a free t-shirt out of it, so that's cool. But yeah, I think you'll find that all of the engineers are really receptive to like giving you code pointers, telling you like tips on how to do things, where to look in code, and everything.
Absolutely. And I just posted the link again to the VS Code repository, specifically linking the help wanted labels, issues with that label. So yeah, feel free to check all that out. And yeah, just kind of echoing with both Jackson and Sana said, I think if you want to learn more, follow on Twitter. If you want to get involved, follow the project, learn how to get involved. Make some contributions and get your Hacktoberfest t-shirt, all of that good stuff. And yeah, that's it that we have for today. So thank you again so much, Jackson and Sana, and thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you. It was fun. Yeah. Bye.